Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun stood at attention in the pristine corridor of the USS Gerald R. Ford, watching as officers hurried past her without a second glance. At 5 feet 4 inches tall, with her regulation uniform pressed to perfection, she had grown accustomed to being overlooked. After 8 years in the Navy, she had learned that respect came harder for someone who looked like she belonged in a classroom rather than commanding a warship. The morning briefing had been particularly brutal. Captain Morrison had introduced her as the new operations officer to a room full of seasoned naval officers, most of whom had twice her years of service. She caught the subtle eye rolls, the whispered comments about diversity hires, and the general assumption that her promotion was anything but merit-based. The executive officer, Commander Bradley, had been especially dismissive, openly questioning her qualifications during the tactical discussion. Sarah had graduated summa cum laude from the Naval Academy and completed her surface warfare officer training at the top of her class. She held advanced degrees in maritime strategy and nuclear engineering, spoke 4 languages fluently, and had served with distinction on 3 different vessels. But none of that seemed to matter when she walked into a room where she was often the only woman and certainly the youngest officer at her rank. The ship was preparing for a major naval exercise in the South China Sea, involving multiple carrier strike groups and allied forces from Japan, Australia, and the United Kingdom. As operations officer, Sarah was responsible for coordinating the complex logistics and tactical movements of over 40 vessels. It was a massive undertaking that would test every aspect of naval warfare capability, from anti-submarine operations to air superiority missions. Her office was located deep within the ship's superstructure, a windowless space filled with digital displays, communication equipment, and stacks of classified documents. The walls were lined with tactical charts showing shipping lanes, depth soundings, and potential threat vectors. Sarah had spent the last 3 weeks studying every detail of the operation, memorizing call signs, formation patterns, and contingency plans. The crew of the Ford was exceptional, but like most military units, it operated on a strict hierarchy where respect was earned through demonstrated competence. Sarah knew that her fellow officers were watching her every move, waiting for her to make a mistake that would confirm their suspicions about her qualifications. She had faced similar challenges before, but never at this level of responsibility. During her previous assignment on the USS Lake Champlain, she had proven herself by successfully coordinating a complex search and rescue operation during a typhoon in the Western Pacific. The mission had saved 17 sailors from a disabled merchant vessel, but it had taken months for her commanding officer to acknowledge her role in the success. She had learned that in the Navy, credit often flowed upward while blame flowed down. The upcoming exercise would involve simulated combat scenarios against a highly capable opposing force. Intelligence reports suggested that several foreign navies would be monitoring the operation closely, using it as an opportunity to assess American naval capabilities. The pressure to perform flawlessly was immense, and any operational failures would be scrutinized by Pentagon officials and congressional oversight committees. Sarah's direct superior, Commander Bradley, had made it clear that he expected her to follow his lead without question. During their first meeting, he had outlined his vision for the exercise, which relied heavily on traditional tactical approaches that had proven successful in previous operations. Sarah had identified several potential weaknesses in his plan, but had learned to choose her battles carefully. Speaking up too forcefully had backfired before, earning her a reputation as difficult to work with. The ship's commanding officer, Captain Morrison, was a respected veteran with over 20 years of naval service. He had commanded vessels during multiple deployments and was known for his tactical brilliance and leadership skills. However, he was also old-school Navy, comfortable with established hierarchies and traditional approaches to naval warfare. Sarah sensed that he was reserving judgment about her capabilities, waiting to see how she performed under pressure. The crew quarters buzzed with anticipation as sailors prepared for the exercise. Many of them had never participated in an operation of this magnitude, involving multiple carrier groups and sophisticated enemy simulation systems. The younger enlisted personnel seemed excited about the prospect of testing their skills against worthy opponents, while the seasoned veterans approached the exercise with professional caution. Sarah spent her evenings reviewing intelligence briefings and studying the latest developments in naval warfare technology. The modern battlefield had evolved dramatically since the Cold War, with cyber warfare, unmanned systems, and advanced missile technology creating new challenges for naval commanders. She had written her master's thesis on adaptive tactical formations and believed that traditional approaches might prove inadequate against sophisticated adversaries. The exercise was scheduled to begin in 72 hours, with the Ford serving as the flagship for Task Force 77. The opposing force would consist of submarines, surface vessels, and aircraft designed to simulate the capabilities of potential adversaries. Advanced computer systems would track every movement and engagement, providing detailed analysis of tactical decisions and their consequences. In her private moments, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this position. Growing up in a military family, she had always been drawn to the strategic aspects of naval warfare. Her father had served as a submarine commander, and her mother had worked as a naval intelligence analyst. They had instilled in her a deep respect for military service and an understanding of the sacrifices required for national defense. The weight of responsibility sat heavily on her shoulders as she prepared for what could be the defining moment of her naval career. Success in this exercise would open doors to future command positions and potentially flag rank. Failure would likely result in a career plateau and questions about her suitability for higher responsibility. Sarah understood that she was not just representing herself, but also paving the way for other women who aspired to senior leadership positions in the Navy. As she walked through the ship's corridors, observing the controlled chaos of pre-exercise preparations, Sarah felt a familiar mixture of nervousness and excitement. She had trained her entire career for moments like this, when theoretical knowledge would be tested against real-world challenges. The next few days would determine whether she truly belonged among the Navy's elite operational commanders or if her critics had been right all along. The exercise began at dawn with the Ford's battle group, assuming formation in the vast expanse of the South China Sea. Sarah stood in the Combat Information Center, surrounded by glowing displays showing the positions of friendly and unknown contacts across hundreds of square miles of ocean. The massive room hummed with activity as radar operators, communication specialists, and tactical coordinators worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. Commander Bradley took his position at the central tactical display, projecting confidence as he began issuing orders to the various units under their command. His plan called for a standard defensive formation with the carrier at the center, protected by layers of destroyers and cruisers in concentric circles. It was a time-tested approach that had proven effective in countless exercises and real-world operations. Sarah monitored the tactical picture from her station, watching as the opposing force began their initial probing attacks. The exercise controllers had programmed the enemy to simulate the capabilities of a sophisticated naval power, complete with advanced submarines, supersonic anti-ship missiles, and coordinated air attacks. Early engagement showed that the opposing force was employing tactics that differed significantly from previous exercises. The first indication of trouble came when two of their outer screen destroyers reported contact with enemy submarines operating in coordinated wolf packs. Traditional anti-submarine warfare doctrine called for individual ships to pursue and engage underwater threats, but the simulated enemy appeared to be using the hunters as bait for larger ambushes. Within the first 4 hours of the exercise, the Ford's battle group had lost 3 surface combatants to submarine attacks. Commander Bradley responded by tightening the defensive formation and calling for additional anti-submarine assets from Allied units. His approach followed established doctrine, but Sarah could see patterns in the enemy movements that suggested a more sophisticated strategy at work. The opposing force seemed to be probing for weaknesses in their formation while simultaneously preparing for a major coordinated assault. During a brief tactical pause, Sarah approached Commander Bradley with her observations. She had identified what appeared to be a systematic effort by the opposing force to map their defensive capabilities and communication patterns. The enemy was sacrificing individual units to gather intelligence about response times, weapon systems effectiveness, and command decision-making processes. She suggested modifying their formation to present false patterns while concealing their true defensive capabilities. Bradley dismissed her concerns with barely concealed irritation, reminding her that he had successfully commanded naval operations before she had even graduated from college. He instructed her to focus on coordinating logistics and communications rather than questioning tactical decisions. Sarah returned to her station, frustrated but not surprised by his response. She had encountered similar attitudes throughout her career, where experience was valued over analysis, and innovation was often seen as criticism of established methods. The exercise continued with increasing intensity as the opposing force launched waves of coordinated attacks against the carrier battle group. Advanced missile systems tested their air defense capabilities, while sophisticated electronic warfare systems disrupted communications and radar systems. Sarah watched the tactical display with growing concern as their defensive perimeter continued to shrink under relentless pressure. By mid-afternoon, the situation had become critical. The fort had taken simulated damage from a submarine-launched missile that penetrated their outer defenses, and 2 of their escorting cruisers had been declared lost by exercise controllers. Commander Bradley was showing signs of stress as he struggled to adapt to tactics that seemed to anticipate every move they made. His voice grew sharper with each order, and Sarah could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air in the Combat Information Center. The breakthrough moment came when Sarah noticed a pattern in the enemy submarine movements that suggested they were being coordinated by a central command vessel hidden somewhere beyond their detection range. Traditional doctrine assumed that submarines operated independently or in small groups, but the tactical picture showed coordination that required real-time communication between multiple units across vast distances. She quickly pulled up historical data from previous exercises and compared it with current enemy movement patterns. Her analysis revealed that the opposing force was using a revolutionary tactical approach that treated submarine warfare as a single coordinated system rather than individual hunting operations. The implications were staggering, as it rendered traditional anti-submarine warfare doctrine largely ineffective. Sarah knew that sharing this information with Commander Bradley would likely result in another dismissive response, but the situation was becoming desperate. The exercise controllers had already declared significant losses among their forces, and Admiral Peterson aboard the flagship was beginning to question the battle group's tactical performance. She decided to prepare a detailed analysis that would be difficult to ignore. Working quickly at her station, Sarah compiled data showing enemy movement patterns, timing correlations, and communication intercepts that supported her theory about coordinated submarine operations. She identified the likely location of the command vessel based on geometric analysis of submarine patrol patterns and suggested an unconventional response that could neutralize the threat. Her plan called for deliberately exposing one of their destroyers as bait while positioning submarines and aircraft in a carefully orchestrated ambush. The approach required precise timing and coordination between multiple units, but it offered the possibility of eliminating the enemy command structure and disrupting their coordinated attacks. It was a high-risk strategy that could either turn the tide of the exercise or result in additional catastrophic losses. When she presented her analysis to Commander Bradley, his initial response was predictably negative. He questioned her interpretation of the intelligence data and expressed concern about the risks involved in her proposed strategy. However, the current tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly, and conventional responses had proven inadequate against the sophisticated enemy tactics. Captain Morrison had been monitoring the tactical situation from bridge and arrived in the Combat Information Center just as Sarah was explaining her analysis. His presence immediately changed the dynamic in the room, as both Bradley and Sarah understood that their performance was being directly evaluated by the ship's commanding officer. The next few minutes would likely determine how the exercise proceeded and how their tactical decisions would be judged by superior officers. Sarah found herself in a position she had faced many times before, where her analysis and recommendations were being weighed against the experience and rank of her superiors. She knew that speaking up aggressively could be interpreted as insubordination, but remaining silent while watching preventable failures unfold would be equally problematic for her career and the mission's success. The tension in the Combat Information Center was palpable as officers waited to see how the tactical situation would be resolved. Enemy forces continued their coordinated attacks, while the Ford's battle group struggled to adapt to tactics that challenged fundamental assumptions about modern naval warfare. Captain Morrison studied the tactical display with the intensity of a man whose career depended on understanding every detail of the unfolding situation. The Ford's battle group had lost nearly 40% of its combat effectiveness in less than 8 hours, a performance that would generate uncomfortable questions from fleet commanders and Pentagon officials. Sarah watched as he traced enemy movement patterns with his finger, clearly struggling to understand how conventional naval tactics had proven so inadequate. "Commander Bradley," Morrison said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. "Explain to me how we've lost 6 major surface combatants to submarine attacks, when we have the most advanced anti-submarine warfare capabilities in the world." Bradley straightened his shoulders and launched into a detailed explanation of enemy tactics that emphasized their unconventional approach and sophisticated technology. He carefully avoided mentioning Sarah's earlier warnings about coordinated submarine operations, instead focusing on the unexpected nature of the threats they were facing. His explanation was technically accurate, but missed the fundamental strategic shift that had rendered their defensive doctrine obsolete. Sarah found herself in an impossible position. Interrupting her superior officer to correct or supplement his briefing would be seen as insubordination, but allowing critical intelligence to go unshared could result in continued tactical failures. She had faced similar dilemmas throughout her career, where military hierarchy conflicted with operational effectiveness. The pressure of the moment was intense, with dozens of officers watching and listening to every word. Captain Morrison's questions became increasingly pointed as he probed for understanding of the tactical situation. His 20 years of naval experience had not prepared him for the coordinated enemy tactics they were facing, and he clearly recognized that conventional responses were proving inadequate. Sarah could see frustration building in his expression as Bradley's explanations failed to provide actionable solutions. The breakthrough moment came when Morrison directly asked about intelligence analysis and pattern recognition efforts. "What does our operations analysis show about enemy coordination and command structure?" he demanded, his eyes scanning the room before settling on Sarah. "Lieutenant Commander Chun, you've been monitoring the tactical picture. What's your assessment of enemy capabilities and intentions?" Sarah felt her heart rate spike as every officer in the Combat Information Center turned to look at her. This was the moment she had trained for throughout her career, when technical competence and tactical insight would be tested under maximum pressure. She knew that her response would be evaluated not just for its accuracy, but for her ability to perform under the scrutiny of senior officers. "Sir, the intelligence picture suggests that enemy submarine operations are being coordinated by a central command vessel operating beyond our current detection range," she began, her voice steady despite the pressure. Traditional anti-submarine warfare doctrine assumes independent or small group operations, but the tactical patterns indicate real-time coordination between multiple units across vast areas of ocean. She moved to the tactical display and began highlighting enemy movement patterns that supported her analysis. Using data from the past 8 hours, she demonstrated how submarine attacks had been timed to maximize effectiveness while minimizing exposure to counterattacks. The coordination required sophisticated communication systems and centralized tactical control that represented a fundamental evolution in submarine warfare doctrine. Commander Bradley's expression darkened as Sarah continued her briefing, clearly unhappy with her public contradiction of his earlier assessment. However, Captain Morrison was paying close attention to her analysis, asking detailed questions about intelligence sources and analytical methodology. Sarah could sense that her explanation was resonating with his understanding of naval tactics and strategic thinking. If your analysis is correct, Lieutenant Commander, what response do you recommend? Morrison asked, his tone suggesting genuine interest rather than skeptical challenge. How do we neutralize a coordinated submarine threat that our current doctrine doesn't address? Sarah's proposed response was as unconventional as the enemy tactics they were facing. She recommended deliberately exposing one of their remaining destroyers as bait while positioning submarines and aircraft in a carefully orchestrated ambush designed to target the enemy command vessel. The plan required precise timing and coordination between multiple units, but it offered the possibility of eliminating the threat at its source rather than reacting to individual attacks. The strategy represented a significant departure from established naval doctrine, which emphasized force protection and graduated responses to threats. Sarah's approach accepted calculated risks in exchange for the possibility of decisive tactical advantage. She outlined the specific positioning requirements, timing sequences, and communication protocols necessary to execute the plan successfully. Commander Bradley immediately voiced strong objections to the proposed strategy, citing the risks involved and questioning the reliability of Sarah's intelligence analysis. He argued for maintaining defensive formations and calling for additional reinforcement from other battle groups. His concerns were legitimate from a force protection perspective, but Sarah could see that Captain Morrison was weighing the potential benefits against the risks of continuing current tactics. The debate that followed was intense, but professional, with both officers presenting their arguments while maintaining military courtesy and respect for chain of command. Sarah found herself defending not just her tactical recommendations, but her analytical methodology and intelligence interpretation. She drew on her advanced education and previous operational experience to support her conclusions while acknowledging the uncertainties inherent in any intelligence assessment. Captain Morrison listened carefully to both perspectives before asking pointed questions about implementation details and contingency planning. He wanted to understand exactly how the proposed strategy would unfold and what backup plans existed if initial assumptions proved incorrect. Sarah had anticipated these questions and provided detailed responses that demonstrated thorough tactical planning. The turning point came when radar operators reported new enemy contacts approaching from an unexpected direction. The coordinated attack that Sarah had predicted was beginning to unfold, with submarine-launched missiles targeting their remaining surface combatants, while additional underwater threats moved into attack positions. Traditional defensive responses would likely result in catastrophic losses within the next 30 minutes. Captain Morrison made his decision with the calm authority that had earned him command of one of the Navy's most sophisticated warships. Commander Bradley, implement Lieutenant Commander Chen's tactical plan immediately. Coordinate with the destroyer USS James Webb for the deception operation and position our submarines according to the Lieutenant Commander's specifications. The next few minutes were a whirlwind of activity as the Ford's combat team scrambled to implement Sarah's unconventional strategy. Communication channels buzzed with orders as ships moved into new positions while aircraft launched to provide support for the complex operation. Sarah found herself at the center of the coordinated response, providing real-time guidance and adjustments as the situation developed. The weight of responsibility was enormous as Sarah realized that her analysis and recommendations were now being tested against a sophisticated enemy in realistic combat conditions. Success would validate her approach to naval warfare and demonstrate the value of innovative thinking in military operations. Failure would likely end her career and potentially cost lives in real-world scenarios where similar tactics might be employed by actual adversaries. The USS James Webb began its dangerous role as bait, deliberately exposing itself to enemy submarine detection while transmitting false communications designed to suggest vulnerable convoy operations. Sarah monitored the tactical display with intense focus as multiple enemy submarines moved toward the destroyer, exactly as her analysis had predicted. The coordinated response pattern confirmed her theory about centralized command and control, but the real test would come when they attempted to locate and neutralize the hidden command vessel. Advanced sonar systems aboard the Ford tracked underwater movements as enemy submarines converged on their target. Sarah had positioned 2 Los Angeles-class attack submarines in carefully calculated positions, using ocean thermal layers and underwater terrain features to remain undetected. The success of the entire operation depended on precise timing and the ability to identify the enemy command vessel among multiple underwater contacts. Captain Morrison stood behind Sarah's workstation as she coordinated the complex operation, providing real-time adjustments based on changing tactical conditions. Her earlier nervousness had been replaced by focused concentration as she drew on years of training and education to manage the sophisticated naval engagement. The Combat Information Center had become remarkably quiet as officers watched the high-stakes operation unfold on their displays. The first phase of the plan succeeded beyond expectations when enemy submarines moved into attack positions exactly where Sarah's analysis had predicted. Their coordinated movements provided additional confirmation of centralized command, and sophisticated signal intelligence equipment aboard the Ford began detecting communication patterns that revealed the approximate location of the command vessel. Sarah felt a surge of confidence as her tactical theory was validated by enemy actions. However, the situation became dramatically more complex when additional enemy contacts appeared on sonar displays from multiple directions. The opposing force had apparently anticipated the possibility of a coordinated counterattack and prepared contingency plans that included reserve submarine units and surface combatants. Sarah realized that her original plan would need immediate modifications to address the expanded threat picture. Working rapidly at her station, she calculated new positioning requirements for friendly submarines while coordinating with aircraft launched from the Ford's flight deck. The tactical problem had evolved from a focused ambush operation to a complex multidimensional engagement involving underwater, surface, and air assets across hundreds of square miles of ocean. The margin for error had shrunk dramatically as enemy forces adapted to their countermeasures. Commander Bradley, despite his earlier objections to Sarah's strategy, proved instrumental in coordinating the expanded response. His experience in naval operations became invaluable as the engagement increased in complexity and intensity. Sarah found herself working closely with him to manage tactical details while maintaining focus on the overall strategic objective of neutralizing the enemy command structure. The breakthrough moment came when signal intelligence operators identified unique communication signatures from a contact operating at the geometric center of enemy submarine movements. Sarah's analysis had predicted that the command vessel would position itself to maintain optimal communication with dispersed submarine units, and the intelligence data confirmed a target matching those characteristics. The challenge now was reaching the command vessel through multiple layers of protective submarines and surface combatants. Sarah's modified plan called for a coordinated attack using submarine-launched torpedoes timed to arrive simultaneously from multiple directions. The complex operation required precise navigation in 3 dimensions while maintaining communication security and avoiding detection by enemy sonar systems. She worked directly with submarine commanders to calculate approach routes that used ocean thermal layers and underwater terrain to mask their movements. Captain Morrison authorized the attack with full understanding of the risks involved. Failure would result in the loss of their remaining submarine assets and leave the Ford's battle group vulnerable to concentrated enemy attack. Success would eliminate the coordination capability that had made enemy submarine operations so effective and potentially turn the tide of the entire exercise. The tension in the Combat Information Center was overwhelming as Sarah monitored the approach of friendly submarines toward their target. Sonar displays showed enemy contacts moving in complex patterns as the command vessel apparently recognized the developing threat. Sarah found herself making real-time tactical adjustments as the situation evolved, drawing on theoretical knowledge and analytical skills that had never been tested under such intense pressure. The attack began with perfectly coordinated torpedo launches from 3 different submarines positioned around the enemy command vessel. Sarah watched the tactical display as weapon tracks converged on their target, while enemy submarines scrambled to provide defensive coverage. The next few minutes would determine whether her unconventional approach to submarine warfare would succeed against sophisticated opposition. Exercise controllers confirmed direct hits on the enemy command vessel, just as sonar operators reported the sudden disorganization of enemy submarine movements. Without centralized coordination, individual submarine units began operating according to standard doctrine, making them vulnerable to traditional anti-submarine warfare tactics. Sarah had successfully identified and neutralized the key capability that had made enemy operations so effective. The psychological impact of the successful counterattack was immediate and dramatic. Enemy submarines that had been operating with aggressive coordination suddenly became reactive and defensive, allowing the Ford's battle group to regain tactical initiative for the first time since the exercise began. Sarah watched as friendly forces systematically engaged and neutralized individual enemy units that were no longer protected by sophisticated tactical coordination. Captain Morrison's expression reflected a mixture of relief and genuine admiration as he observed the tactical turnaround. The Ford's battle group had gone from facing potential catastrophic defeat to achieving decisive victory within the span of 2 hours. Sarah's analysis and recommendations had not only saved the exercise, but demonstrated innovative approaches to modern naval warfare that could have significant implications for future operations. Commander Bradley approached Sarah's workstation as the tactical situation stabilized, extending his hand in a gesture of professional respect. "Outstanding analysis and execution, Lieutenant Commander," he said quietly, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine appreciation. "Your approach to coordinated submarine threats represents a significant advancement in our tactical doctrine." The success of the operation extended beyond the immediate tactical victory to validate Sarah's analytical methodology and strategic thinking. Her willingness to challenge established doctrine while maintaining respect for military hierarchy had proven essential to mission success. The exercise had demonstrated that innovative thinking and technical competence could overcome traditional assumptions about rank and experience in operational decision-making. Admiral Peterson arrived aboard the Ford 3 hours after the exercise concluded, his expression unreadable as he reviewed the after-action reports in the ship's conference room. The tactical turnaround had been so dramatic that exercise controllers had initially questioned whether system malfunctions might have influenced the results. Detailed analysis confirmed that the Ford's battle group had achieved one of the most decisive tactical victories in recent naval exercise history. Sarah found herself seated at the conference table, surrounded by senior officers whose ranks represented decades of naval experience and combat leadership. Admiral Peterson, a veteran of 3 combat deployments and widely respected throughout the Pacific Fleet, had personally requested her presence at the debrief session. The weight of the moment was not lost on her as she prepared to explain her analysis and tactical recommendations to flag rank leadership. The Admiral began the session by acknowledging the unprecedented nature of the tactical challenges faced during the exercise. Enemy forces had employed coordination techniques that differed fundamentally from traditional submarine warfare doctrine, creating situations that existing tactical responses could not adequately address. He emphasized that the lessons learned would have significant implications for fleet training and operational planning. Captain Morrison provided a detailed timeline of tactical decisions and their outcomes, carefully crediting Sarah's intelligence analysis and strategic recommendations. He explained how traditional defensive formations had proven inadequate against coordinated submarine attacks, and how Lieutenant Commander Chen's innovative approach had identified and neutralized the key enemy capability. His presentation was professional and thorough, highlighting both the challenges faced and the solutions developed. When Admiral Peterson directed his attention to Sarah, she felt the familiar mixture of nervousness and confidence that had characterized her entire naval career. She had prepared extensively for this moment, organizing her thoughts and supporting data to present a clear explanation of her analytical methodology and tactical recommendations. The opportunity to brief flag rank leadership represented a significant milestone in her professional development. Sarah's presentation focused on the intelligence patterns that revealed coordinated submarine operations and the strategic implications of centralized tactical command. She explained how geometric analysis of enemy movements had identified the likely location of command vessels and how coordinated attacks could neutralize the coordination capability. Her briefing was technically precise but accessible, demonstrating both analytical depth and communication skills. Admiral Peterson interrupted her presentation with probing questions that tested her understanding of broader strategic implications. He wanted to know whether similar tactics might be employed by potential adversaries in real-world scenarios and how the Navy should modify training and doctrine to address coordinated submarine threats. Sarah's responses drew on her advanced education and strategic thinking to provide insights that went beyond the immediate tactical situation. The discussion that followed involved all senior officers present and ranged from technical details about sonar capabilities to strategic questions about naval warfare evolution. Sarah found herself contributing as an equal participant rather than a junior officer providing input to superiors. Her analysis and recommendations were being evaluated on their merit rather than her rank or experience level. Admiral Peterson's conclusion was both gratifying and challenging for Sarah's future career development. He announced that her analytical approach and tactical innovations would be incorporated into fleet training programs and distributed to operational commanders throughout the Pacific. More importantly, he recommended her for immediate assignment to the Naval War College as an instructor in advanced tactical analysis. The recommendation represented a dramatic acceleration of Sarah's career trajectory, moving her from operational assignments to strategic education responsibilities typically reserved for more senior officers. Admiral Peterson explained that the Navy needed innovative thinkers who could bridge the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application in modern warfare scenarios. Sarah's performance during the exercise had demonstrated exactly those capabilities. Commander Bradley approached Sarah after the formal debrief session, offering congratulations and acknowledgement of her exceptional performance. He admitted that his initial skepticism had been based on assumptions about experience and rank that had proven irrelevant when tested against actual tactical challenges. Their professional relationship had evolved from hierarchical tension to mutual respect based on demonstrated competence. The transformation in how other officers viewed Sarah was immediately apparent in their interactions during the days following the exercise. Conversations that had previously been polite but distant became engaged professional discussions about tactical theory and operational planning. Her analysis was sought out rather than tolerated, and her recommendations carried weight that reflected her demonstrated expertise rather than her rank. Captain Morrison's fitness report would later describe Sarah's performance as exceptional and recommend her for accelerated promotion consideration. He noted her ability to analyze complex tactical situations, develop innovative solutions, and communicate effectively with senior leadership under pressure. The report emphasized her potential for flag rank leadership and strategic responsibilities. Sarah's reflection on the experience revealed the complex dynamics that had shaped her naval career. The exercise had validated her belief that technical competence and innovative thinking could overcome traditional barriers related to rank, experience, and gender. However, she also recognized that opportunities to demonstrate those capabilities were often limited by hierarchical structures and cultural assumptions. The assignment to the Naval War College would provide Sarah with opportunities to influence how future naval officers were trained and how tactical doctrine evolved to address modern threats. Her experience during the South China Sea exercise would become a case study in adaptive tactical thinking and the importance of challenging established assumptions when facing sophisticated adversaries. As the Ford returned to port, Sarah stood on the flight deck watching the sunset reflect off the ocean surface. The past week had fundamentally changed her understanding of her place in the Navy and her potential for future leadership roles. She had proven to herself and others that innovative thinking and technical expertise could make decisive contributions to naval operations. The broader implications of her success extended beyond personal career advancement to questions about how military organizations identified and developed leadership potential. Sarah's experience suggested that traditional metrics of experience and rank might sometimes obscure capabilities that could prove crucial in operational situations. Admiral Peterson's final words to Sarah had been both encouraging and challenging. He emphasized that her analytical skills and strategic thinking represented exactly the kind of innovation the Navy needed to maintain superiority in increasingly complex operational environments. However, he also stressed that leadership development required continued growth and the ability to inspire others to achieve similar levels of excellence. The exercise had concluded with Sarah receiving recognition that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. Her journey from overlooked junior officer to recognized tactical innovator illustrated both the potential for merit-based advancement and the obstacles that could limit such opportunities. The experience had proven that competence and innovation could triumph over skepticism and tradition when given the chance to demonstrate their value.